Hello out there. Welcome back to the Rewrite Reality Writing Challenge. And I still don't know why I called it that. That's like a tongue twister. Rewrite Reality Writing Challenge. Say it 10 times fast. All right. So it is now time. It is now time for you to submit. And I will tell you how to do that in just a minute. But before I do, let me explain a little bit more about this challenge because you can always join in the last minute if you so desire. You're going to sign up down below if you'd like to. But what our job was to take a story from the news and rewrite it in our own style with our own voice and, embellish it perhaps the way that we might if we were writing a memoir, etc., etc. The story we were all given was a story about a father who had to rescue his daughter in a water park because she got stuck on a slide, which was a somewhat fun story, somewhat lighthearted story. There's a little bit of drama going on. Obviously, you can read into it more than what the story was. So I'm very curious to see what people do with that. And today I'm going to go through some samples of what you might have done, although hopefully not, because I'm going to be doing some editing. So I decided to put my head together and come up with some interesting examples of ways we could go. I like to give examples that are quite poor because it's fun. But it's not 100% poor. There's going to be some interesting things to glean from it, I am sure. All right. I love it. It's time to talk of many things, of cabbages, kings, and submissions. Thank you, Lewis Carroll. All right. Yes, there is a prize for the grand winner, as well as a grab bag of prizes just for signing up. And that will all be revealed next week. How many heads do I have? I don't know. That's a good question. If you have not signed up, please do not miss out in case you want to get in on the program. Submissions will be through the writing desk. I know it says yesterday. It actually did just open up today. I was a little bit up on the take there. And people are like, how do I do that? Well, I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute. Let's just take a trip into the writing desk. Bing! Wow, look at that. It's like magic. So up here in the writing desk, you will see a 3.5 floppy disk, which is the universal sign for save, even though we don't use them anymore. Isn't it funny how that works? I wonder how long that's going to last. It's like 200 years from now. They're like, what is this? Where did this icon come from? It's an old relic from a forgotten time. Anyway, so you're going to hit save, and then you're going to go down to submissions. See that? See submissions? Yes. And then you're going to click here, and then you're going to see, look at there. It's the Rewrite Reality Challenge. Ends in 2 days, 10 hours, 54 minutes, and 30 seconds, and it's clocking down. Yes, that is how much time you have to submit. Keep in mind, you can only hit this button once, so don't do it unless you're ready. Everything in your workspace will be accessible to me. So if you have some notes in there, I'm going to see them. So I don't know if that really matters to you, but I'm just letting you know that. So yeah, your noteboard will be there. If you wrote anything in your inspiration studio, that's going to be there. In terms of the actual challenge, I'm going to be looking at the body of text unless for some reason it's hiding somewhere else because you just wrote it in your notes and you never copied it over, but I doubt that'll be the case. But it's going to be in the white space there. That is what I'm going to be looking at. And you can see this little word count up here. Yep. Keep in mind, we're trying to keep it under 1,000 words. So, there you go. The story does need to be up in the workspace. Right. You have to be on this screen where you're in the file, where you can hit the save. Does your name need to be in the document? It does not, because it'll be attached to your username in AutoCrit. Although your username may not tell me who you are, because some users are anonymous and therefore will just have a winner that's an email address. But if that's who you are, if you're somebody, If you're somebody who likes to be anonymous, what do you mean my word count isn't showing? It's right up there, 663. I'm confused. But if you are, yeah, it's a 3.5. There's also the 5.25, 5.25. The true floppy disks, even though the 3.5 were not floppy, they're just called floppy. It's another vestige of language over time. Anyway, what was I saying? Yes, we'll be looking at the text that is in here. If you do not have your name associated to your account in AutoCrit, then obviously I won't know who you are, so you might put your name somewhere. But perhaps you don't want anybody to know your name. You're an anonymous sort of writer, and you are, and that's up to you. We're not going to demand you give us a name. All we need is an email address so that if you win, we can send you a prize. That's all we care. That is all we care about. Terms that people will one day wonder about the origins. Hanging up. Keep it going. Yes. Yes. Yeah, hanging up is true, right? Because you just hit a button now. It's like call over, dial in. Yeah. There's other ones that I'm sure I'm not super great with um, origins of words all the time. Although I do find it very fascinating. But I'm sure there's other examples. All right, so let's go back to here. Yes, you have until Thursday. You have a couple of days in order to do so. All right. So, yeah, last week we did tips for writing more effective nonfiction. If you have not seen that stream, well, you can go back into the archives. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to this stream. We're giving tips all the time on writing. Today, what I thought we would do is some real-time editing in the writing desk of some examples of what you might have done or what somebody might have done. And like I said, these examples are deliberately written to be something that allows for editing to show you perhaps some things you don't want to fall into. All right, so let's look at this first example there. And if you have any other questions about the challenge, please let me know. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here so you can read it a little bit better, but it will take away some of my screen, just letting you know that. So, all right, I'm going to move over here. In the realm of heart-stirring moments, there unfolded a scene that melded the bands of courage and devotion, leaving spectators awestruck and teary-eyed. Now you can see what the author's trying to do here, right? They're trying to paint a dramatic opening, tell us why we're going to care about the story. But this is a little bit of overcooking the chicken, don't you think? It seems quite overwrought. It's very telly, isn't it? It's very somebody's like, when is the time? It says so here. It's 2 days, 10 hours, 49 minutes, and 50 seconds. Yes. So it is basically Thursday at midnight. So it's essentially Friday is the deadline, but it's Thursday at 11:59 Eastern. Yes. All right. Yeah. So in the realm of heart-stirring moments, there unfolded a scene that melded the bounds of courage and devotion, leaving spectators awestruck and teary-eyed. Yeah. Obviously, this is not the best way of starting things out. You certainly could say you could do that kind of high level third person omniscient sort of little do they know this is what's going to happen. But often that does feel kind of dramatic, soap opera-y, melodramatic. Like it doesn't feel too common. What would be better would be getting into a deep point of view of somebody, and maybe that person is saying, that was going to be a terrible day. Let me tell you about it. That's a little bit better, right? It doesn't feel quite as overly dramatic as that. But you don't even need to do that. You can just hint at it, right? Because you can do it thematically by saying, the clouds in the sky should have been the first sign. And you're like, oh, something bad's going to happen, right? And that's not nearly as overly poetic and purple as this. Okay. A tale of one father's unwavering determination to rescue his beloved daughter from the clutches of an obstinate water slide played out like a symphony of raw emotions at the glistening expanse of Warrington Golfers World Theme Park. I do love the glistening expanse. Yeah, that's like, again, you're just it's purple. You're overusing these descriptive words that aren't really doing a lot on the page. There's really there's no reason to to state it that way. I do like the obstinate water slide, and that I do like the personification of the water slide. Now, personifying an inanimate object can get you in the weeds quickly in terms of thinking being a little overly dramatic or silly or something like that. But sometimes it can be very effective, right? Because the character is viewing it that way. Because we often personify things, particularly things that are annoying us, right? Uh, we um, we have a toaster that never really works, and we're like, I hate this thing hates me, right? So that would be a good reason. So I could totally see somebody talking about like an obstinate water slide, depending on who it is. But remember too, somebody was talking about vocabulary, right? A for vocabulary. The writer may be British, maybe they're cover. The truth of the matter is that when you're writing, if you're trying to write from a deep point of view, which is generally a great idea for memoir or something that's like, a deep memory moment kind of thing, you want to write from a perspective. And so you have to keep in mind the vocabulary of that perspective. You don't want it to feel like somebody else is ghostwriting somebody else's perspective. So if we were going to take the perspective of the girl who got caught, she probably wouldn't say an obstinate water slide. Now she might personify the water slide as something that was mean to her, right? But she would not say obstinate more than likely, unless she has an extremely high vocabulary. My mom always said the machinery could see her coming. No, exactly, right? Exactly. Possessed toasters. All right, so let's keep going. The sun hung suspended in a cerulean sky, casting its golden tendrils upon the realm of mirth and enchantment. And yeah, this is like really overcooking. It's like, it's poetic, but is this really necessary for this sort of story? Amid the splashes of laughter and the distant thrill of amusement rides, a solitary figure stood at the base of the Togo Tower waterslide, a marvel of azure tubing that spiraled with a promise of exhilaration and delight. But this day, this very instant, held a twist that not even the most intricate of theme park designs could foresee. I don't even understand this because it's like, how would the designs see it themselves? Um, yes, I do have a lot of fun with this. It's fun. It's fun to overcook things, right? But let's take a step back though, and yes, this is way over the top. However, there is some things going on here that isn't bad, right? So amid the splashes of laughter and distant thrill of amusement rides, a solitary figure sits at the base. That contrast is nice, right? It is a good contrast to have that somebody there is standing and watching, meanwhile everybody else is having fun, but that person is zoomed in on what is about to happen, which is his daughter going down the water slide, or maybe perhaps she's already stuck. And you're trying to give that juxtaposition. Juxtaposition is interesting. It's conflict, right? In the middle of all these people having fun, somebody is not. Somebody is stressed out. Yeah, yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. And also the idea that something that should have been an enjoyable day turned out to end up uh, going awry. Yes. This is also something that makes sense, right? This is a perspective to take. We'll say it's different, not just journalism. Oh, yes. I mean, the goal with this was not to write journalism. That's what we said early on. The idea was that we're not an unbiased third party in the way that journalists are supposed to be, just reporting facts. We are deliberately being biased and trying to be opinionated and taking a perspective and immersing the audience in that perspective, which frankly happens a lot anyway, even in the world of journalism, because it's very hard to be engaged if somebody isn't taking a perspective, which is why it's an easy thing to fall into. Not to get like, too political, but it's a reason. If you want to ever if you want to ever feel better about the fact that a lot of things seem to be biased and from a personal perspective, it's because it's very hard not to write that way, right? It's very hard not for you to take an opinion, especially about something that matters, and it's very hard to make it engaging if you don't take a personal opinion, right? So what we are asking you to do is actually stretch that further. Little Sienna, a Sheriff's Bright of 6 years, had embarked on the aquatic adventure with the innocence of a child's heart. See, I mean, that's really redundant. When you're like, if you're going to describe them as angelic, you also don't need to say the innocence of a child's heart. So even if you are going to overcook it in that way, and be like the angelic child rose, you don't need to keep going on about this. Unbeknownst to her, fate had woven a different tapestry that day, one of challenge and fortitude. Now, this is an interesting thing to do, right? Because this is the perspective that nothing happens by chance, that some sort of supernatural force was at play. And that very well could be the thought of the person involved, right? People take that perspective all the time. Lots of people believe that there is no such thing as coincidence and there's a supernatural force guiding things. And that would be kind of interesting in the context of something like a somebody getting stuck on a water slide. How would they unpack such a thing? So that's actually a pretty interesting perspective. All right. As her young spirit took its leap down the slide. See, not only is that like silly sounding, but it's like she just went down the slide. Like you can just say it. It's not like she's taking her spirit as it's something separate. Now, let's imagine you were going to do that, right? Let's imagine you are going to personify like the happiness that's going to get removed and then restored. You could perhaps kind of do that, but that's a very tricky thing to do. Right? It gets flowery very quickly to dissect a person and make their personalities into characters in their own right. Generally speaking, you could just speak to them as the whole self, and their opinion changes. A trepidation unforeseen seized her, ensnaring her with the sinewy curves of the water slide's embrace. That's amazing. Okay. If anybody writes a sentence like that, you might just end up in the final, even though I don't think you'll win. But the water slides. But see here, it's like it's kind of fun to think about the water slides embrace, as it were, rather than them just getting stuck. Right? Again, there's a personification there, and there's something kind of sinister about that. So the clutches of the water slide, things like that, there's opportunity there. I'm just saying, you wouldn't necessarily, especially if you think about it from the child's perspective, right? Children do tend to be overly dramatic, right? I guess adults do too sometimes. I'm not trying to stigmatize or anything like that, but children do tend to read into a lot of things. They tend to have more in the moment thinking. And so, yes, inanimate stranger danger. Kids are told a lot of things in life are hazards. A lot of things in life are out to get them. And so it would change things. I do not remember what the name of the girl's name was originally, but we're not really writing about them anymore. We're changing the story, so it's really not relevant. He cries for aid. Her cries for aid, sorry, like the tiniest bells chiming in the distance. That's a metaphor that makes no sense. Who cares? Like the tiny, why don't you just, I don't get it. Found resonance in the heart of a man who had sworn to shield her from any harm. Okay? Yeah. All right, let's keep going. Andrew Jackson, a father whose love was mightier than any mountain. That's the tell, right? We don't really want to tell that. We want to demonstrate that. So, what you would want to do is show immediately his response to his daughter getting stuck and being very concerned and all of those things. Witnessed his daughter's plight from the edges of the pool where the water's crystal surface glistened like a mirror reflecting the constellation of emotions adorning his face. That is very close to being good, in my opinion. Like if you wanted to go in an artistic sort of way, you could also tell it in a more straightforward way, but there is a version of that sentence that could potentially work. There's just too much going on. It needs to be toned down. This is the situation where they tell you, like, when you're dressing up, it's like remove one accessory because you usually overdo it. It's that kind of thing. Makeup, it's like just a few steps down. Without a hint of hesitation, without a second thought, that's kind of redundant, he took upon himself the mantle of a hero for his daughter, a hero for himself. It kind of undermines the hero for his daughter. I don't really like that. With a resolve that rivaled the very torrents of the waterfall cascading nearby, Andrew embarked on an ascent that seemed nearly preposterous to the average eye. I mean, it's helpful to do that. I wouldn't do it in such a way, but yes, you would want to demonstrate the fact that other people think that, wow, that's kind of a nutty thing to do. Isn't that kind of dangerous? Is this really going to work? The water slide, a slippery behemoth that dared to challenge even gravity's command. That's cool. I like that. Bore witness to his journey each foothold etching a tailor of valor upon its glossy surface. I mean, you can see where there's something there almost, right? It's over the top, but there's something kind of there. It's not 100% terrible in terms of its concept. It's just so overwrought in the way it's being presented. His muscles flexed with unparalleled tenacity, his breath synchronized with the rhythm of his determination. And again, it's getting at the root of what is going on. It's dramatizing it. It's making it into a bigger deal than perhaps it actually was. And this is really mostly taking the perspective of Andrew. At least that's his name in this story. Sure, that's not a bad perspective to take. Take the perspective of the person who's in the most pain as possible. And the question is who was in more pain, the daughter who was stuck or the father who had to see their daughter in a uncomfortable situation? You could easily make the case the parent is more disturbed in that situation. And also they're going to be the one doing the active thing. They're going to be climbing up the water slide. So it does make sense to take that as the perspective. But you have a option. Obviously, what perspective you take. You could take her perspective, his perspective, the water slide's perspective. I don't know. It's going to be up to you. Somebody does take the water slide's perspective. That'll be pretty awesome. In moments that stretch like eternity itself. Yeah, this is pretty long-winded too. Andrew reached the zenith, the spot where his daughter's rosy cheeks met the cool touch of the water slide's frame. You can see the author here is constantly making comparisons, right? This is like this, and this is like this, and it's similes and things like that. That's just kind of a bland, generic way of sort of writing, and it also can while analogies can be helpful because it can tell you something about the character, when it's just kind of analogies for analogy's sake, it's pointless. You can just describe the thing and you're not gaining much by doing otherwise. Hold on, Sienna, he called, his voice ringing with a resonance that could command mountains to bow. His Spider-Man-like agility was nothing short of miraculous as he navigated the seemingly vertical terrain with the agility of a gazelle, each movement a testament to the profound bond between father and child. This is exactly the sort of feeling you want to get across, just not in those words. It is just it is simplifying this all. It is telling you what to think. It's not letting you actually experience it, right? It's just so and I know I told you to be opinionated and biased, but what you need to do is you need to state what's going on in a biased way, and then the audience gets the conclusion that it's nothing short of miraculous and things like that. This could have been 300, 400 words, not 600 plus. Easily. Less Spider-Man, more Frogman. I like that. But see, that's more human. That's more real to be like, he felt like Spider-Man, or perhaps maybe more aptly Frogman as he scampered up. Sure. And then a release, a resounding echo of triumph and jubilation as the dinghy was freed from its watery prison. With an audacious leap that seemed to defy the very bounds of gravity, Andrew slid down in tandem with his daughter, their shared laughter ringing through the air like a symphony composed by the cosmos themselves. A splash, a whirl of water, and they emerged victorious, their spirits entwined in a dance of elation. I mean, it's trying its best to give you some emotional thought, but the problem is you can say all the things and you can say how dramatic it is, but if all you're doing is saying, wow, wasn't that dramatic, this is really dramatic, isn't this great, it's not going to feel very dramatic, right? We're not really in the moment with them. We're kind of out here in the distance, like describing it as some, like I said, omniscient sort of narrator. We're not really feeling like we're down in the depths with them. This is not the last day to submit. You have a couple of days to do so. You're exactly at 1,000 words and you're afraid to even edit. Well, maybe you don't need to. Maybe you figured it out. Daddy to the rescue, Emma wrote, the words etching themselves into the annals of time and Ota love's indomitable power. It's awesome. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the theme park in shades of amethyst and gold, the video shared on TikTok spread like wildfire, a testament to the extraordinary lengths a father would go for the love of his child. But beyond the likes and the shares, there remained a tale of devotion that transcended the realm of the virtual. For in that moment, Andrew Jackson became more than a man. He became a legend, an emblem of love's unyielding triumph over adversity. and Sienna, cradled within her father's arms, knew that she was not merely a passenger on a water slide, but the heroine of a story whose father's love knew no bounds. Obviously, nothing about this paragraph needs to exist. This should be something that's clear in the text. But I do like the idea that this would be clear in the text, right? Again, we're trying to tell a story, and you could say, well, that's just so over the top and that's ridiculous and melodramatic. But it may have not have been to the person in that situation. I mean, I can tell you there have been some incredibly moving moments when my parents have done something for me, and it was a very small sort of gesture, but it did bring a tremendous amount of impact. If I thought about it for any length of time, I'd probably start tearing up. And it really wasn't much of an anything kind of thing, right? It was an act of kindness. So there's nothing wrong with trying to get the audience to feel like this. But what you want to do is actually show that. You want to demonstrate that. You do not want to simplify yourself into that. All right. So one place where we might have been able to figure this out is in the showing versus telling. And yes, we have the nose, which would have clued us into certain things going amiss here. Ugh, I need to zoom out. Sorry. I was zoomed in so you could see it. But yes, you can see here, this is a very clear tell. Knew that she was not. A father's love knew no bounds. Uh-huh. Yep. That is not particularly great. And I don't think there's a lot of filler in there. Oh wait, there was. See, I didn't even catch that. There's a lot of that's. There unfolded a scene that tube that spiraled a little twist that not even jibber tapestry that day. I don't know. Some of these are not fillers though. With the resolve that rivaled, well, you could change it to resolve rivaling, an ascent that seemed nearly impossible. Slippery behemoth that dared challenge. I mean, it just exposes a lot of stickiness in these sentences that people were talking about. They're like, it felt like it could have been shorter, for sure. Seemed is generally not a great word because why is it seeming like something instead of it actually being the thing? Like, can we be committed to something? Now, yeah, if you're in a deep point of view, maybe the person's hedging their bets, but often it's better to hear from somebody with a stronger perspective. All right, let's hear another version. At a theme park, a dad scaled a water slide to help his stuck daughter. He saw a TikTok video by Maurice. Andrew Jackson acted as Sienna struggled at Gulliver's World. He did a Spider-Man thing, climbed and released a stuck thing, then he went down with her. Yeah, this is the opposite of what you cannot do. It's just be super vague and not helpful. And I don't think anybody is probably going to be at this level, but I just want to show the other extreme. All right, let's look at this one. Heartbeats thundered in Sienna's chest like the drums of an impending storm as she gazed upwards, her fingers gripping the edge of the slide's flimsy dinghy. This is not awful. I would say I would pull back a bit, but it's at least an opening sentence which immediately hooks, right? We are in the moment and we're in somebody's point of view. The water slide, once a source of boundless excitement, now stretched above her like a towering sentinel of trepidation. Again, this isn't awful. It's just a little overbaked. It was this and now it's like this. I think that's all right. But towering sentinel of trepidation just feels quite overcooked, don't you think? I would say, the water slide seemed like a good idea. Now it loomed over her and or something and get much more simplistic. Her wide eyes fixated on the vertigo-inducing height from which she had hoped to plunge into a world of laughter and splashes. Again, it's pretty close, but I think it's overdoing it at the end. The vertigo-inducing height is fine, which you hope to plunge, and then it's like into a world of laughter and splashes. I don't know. I feel like that's a bit much, but this is definitely better than the last example. Well, certainly better than the last example, but even one before that, of course. Come on, Sienna, you can do it. Her own voice, tinged with one wavering determination, echoed in her ears. The slide surface was unforgivingly slick, a cascade of water droplets obscuring her view as if nature herself conspired against her. I actually like this sentence pretty well. It's not simple. This still may not be the style of writing you do. You might write more simplistically than this. It's quite dramatically written, but it's not bad. I don't know if I would do the as if nature itself conspired against her necessarily, because that's kind of inferred. I don't know if we have to go as far as to state that out. Not to mention, that doesn't sound very much like a young kid to say, wow, nature itself is conspiring against me. So if I was going to keep that, I would probably change it, as if nature was out to get me or something like that. Unforgivably slick. You don't like that? I think it's kind of funny sounding. And again, I mean, that also doesn't sound much like a kid, but kids do tend to use adverbs. So I would say if you're getting in the deep point of view of the kid, you might use more adverbs than you normally would in order to have that kind of voice. Panic threatened to seize her, to crush her like an invisible weight. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. That's too much. Let's pull back. And then a resonating boom seemed to echo through the park. See, here's that seem to again. Authors do this a lot when they're not very confident in themselves. They might have imposter syndrome or something like that. Don't be like that. Be more confident. Don't say seems. Don't say appears or things like that. Just make it what it is. That's better. And, don't try to cover your behind. No need to use weasel words. This is not a legal document. A sonic herald of the coming storm. Yeah, nothing about that was particularly great. Her father's figure materialized like a guardian angel, his presence a promise of unwavering protection. I think this is a great concept. I just think that this should be demonstrated, not just said, right? If he kind of appears and you describe it in angelic sort of ways, and immediately there's a sense of calm or something, you could actually be showing us this rather than simplifying and giving this overview. Andrew Jackson's eyes met hers, an unspoken assurance passing between them like a silent current. Hold on, Sienna, Daddy's coming. I don't see why you would need to even include dialogue if it's going to be that generic, right? What I would say is in a situation like this, what you want to do is show the person for who they are. So maybe they would say something that's comforting, that's very personal and specific, or they would say something kind of humorous or something like that. You don't see the father as a hero because they went on the side of himself, but I don't know. I mean, things happen. Fair enough. um, with a grace that rivaled her childhood fantasies. Her father skillfully released the captive dinghy, the satisfying pop of freedom echoing in their ears. Yeah, no. This is, dramatizing the wrong thing. I would say what would be more important is like the freeing of their body from the situation and feeling sense of movement or something like that. And then they were plummeting, the world blurring around them in a frenzy of exhilaration and speed. Sienna's laughter mingled with her father's, a symphony of joy that resonated through the depths of her being. This is totally not necessary because this is already there, right? Things like that. Mhm. As they burst forth from the slide's confines, water droplets cascading around them. Obviously, you don't need droplets, like whatever water is cascading around them, like a shimmering curtain. Sienna felt an overwhelming surge of triumph. Her fingers remained intertwined with her father's, a tangible link to the hero who had scaled not just the slide, but the barrier of her fears. And again, this is the sort of thing you will see where this demonstrates this tangible link. And then you say, just in case you didn't miss it, audience, that's a tangible link. And it's like, yeah, I got it. So you do need to be careful about that. You often hear the advice, show, don't tell, dramatize, don't summarize. And that is true. Show, don't tell. Don't show and tell, and don't dramatize and summarize, right? The reason why we do that is because we're concerned that perhaps the audience isn't going to pick up on our dramatization and they're not going to read between the lines and figure it out. They probably will. Give them more credit. Amidst the jubilant cheers of onlookers and the triumphal symphony of their journey, Sienna realized that the waterslide had become a metaphor for life's challenges. See, this is where you so get on the nose, where it's like, I want it to be a metaphor for life's challenges, but I want that to be dramatized, and I want the audience to infer that versus the story having to tell us that, right? In her father's eyes, she saw not just a savior, but a guide who would always be there to help her conquer every obstacle that lay ahead. With a heart full of gratitude and an unbreakable bond, back to the bond again, she knew that she would forever cherish this extraordinary adventure, etching it into the tapestry of memories as a testimony to love's undying strength. This is all the kind of stuff that you need to be careful about. I do think at the end of a story like this, you do need a little bit of a button of why did we care? Why did we do this? But just be cautious that you don't overcook it quite so much. You don't summarize quite so much. You let the audience infer some of it themselves. Could you use a word like seems if your deep point of view is trying to figure out? Yes, but remember, people who hedge are not as engaging as people who don't. So, for example, you'll notice when somebody is trying to speak authoritatively, they will be confident in everything. They'll be like, yes, this is the way you do it. It's like, you want to make $50,000 online? You got to do it this way, right? They don't say, well, it seems like perhaps this is the best method, because that's not very compelling. And so just keep that in mind when you're writing. If the character isn't all that sure of what's going on or that sure of their opinion, we're not going to be that sure of their opinion either. We're not going to find them as engaging. We're not going to be as led by them, etc., etc. Okay. You often need to give your character a little more pluck, or whatever you want to say, a little more gumption, that perhaps they know what reality is. There's nothing wrong with hedges. I love hedge mazes. That's awesome, for sure. Do you have to use the names in the examples? No, because remember, we are rewriting reality. In fact, you might as well change them, because it's not about these people anymore. We are influenced by the story, but we are retelling it as if it had happened to us, as if we're somebody else in it, as if we're ghostwriting, etc., etc. We're just using it as inspiration. All right. So let's see how the filler words went on this one. Let's see if it was the same kind of problem. Lots of that's. There was the seemed. There's some just scaled, not just the slice. She saw not just a savior. Often just, if it's not a filler word where it's not going to remove meaning to get rid of it, it's still something to look out for, because it can indicate some tricky sort of writing, that kind of overdoing it sort of thing. I find just is a word I don't generally like to use too much. Very is another one. Even when very is not completely redundant, often it is fairly redundant. You can do a better word instead of very whatever. You can change the whatever is into something that's more effective. Now, what about something like pacing? How was the pacing in this? Not too bad. I think just the last paragraph was big. Yeah. So that's not bad. It moves pretty well. And only that last paragraph was a bit blocky. That is something to keep in mind. However, the variation of it is not too dramatic. If I it's fairly flat. There may be opportunity here to have more variance and have a little more boop, 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 just to make it a little more interesting. It all kind of feels the same. So it feels kind of flat. Let's look at the sentence variation. I think that's going to feel pretty flat too. Not as bad. There's some shorter sentences as well. So that's not so bad. But yeah, you want to have a little bit of variation. Keep in mind, longer paragraphs, longer sentences are a clue to the audience that perhaps it is more important, either much longer or much shorter, because they are the variant, right? And so they're going to draw attention with a little short paragraph, and you're going to draw attention with a longer paragraph. All right. Any other questions about the challenge itself? I'm curious. Go ahead and fire away at them. All right. Well, one thing, if you're interested in learning more about writing nonfiction, and much like we are doing here, we're going to do a whole course on that. Memoir writing course. So if you know somebody who's always wanted to tell their story and you'd like to write for them, or if you are that person who's always wanted to tell your story, or if there's even a other person's story or time in history perhaps you want to talk about, this is all going to be helpful. This is nonfiction narrative. So, it's all based on how do you take reality, kind of work it out? How do you compile all of your random events in life into something that is some sort of cohesive whole, etc., etc. Tonight in the fantasy slash sci-fi club, we're going to do some live reading, kind of like what you just saw. Although I'm going to be asking everybody in the club to submit something. And so when you come on the club tonight, come with something in mind and shoot it in the chat, and we will look into it in real time, and we'll have some fun looking at each other's works. What's next is horror. Horror tomorrow is going to be dealing with psychological horror. So Gareth at 6 p.m. I'm sorry, fantasy tonight is at 7 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow horror is at 6 p.m. Eastern. And that is going to be psychological horror. So what makes psychological horror its own subgenre of horror, and how to get the most out of human suffering, which sounds totally up Gareth's alley. I'm sure that'll be great. Yes, we do have a mystery workshop coming up. The mystery plot craft workshop. And that is going to be a week, or not a week. It's going to be on Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to sign up, it's right here. We're going to go step by step through all the different story beats of a mystery. And then you're going to be able to get personalized feedback from me about your beat sheet. So if you want to come up with your beat sheet, I will let you know certain things to look out for, certain things that might make sense or not make sense, etc., etc. And of course, you can use either something you're outlining, or if you're not an outliner, if you're a pantser type, you can outline your book that's written after the fact, and you can submit that, and that can help you with the developmental edit. And of course, we always have the accountability club. Oh, there's the unmasking mystery. There we go. Yes. Ta-da. And then we also have the accountability club every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. That is a fun little 15-minute exercise and a 15-minute writing sprint. All right, so make sure you go ahead and you submit your files. Like I said, you're going to go and you're going to hit save, and then you're going to go to submissions, and it's for the Rewrite Reality Challenge. Then submissions will close in a couple of days, in the middle of the night, beginning of Friday. And next week, we will read the top 10 finalists, and the audience will vote on who the ultimate winner is. I have to say, I'm really looking forward to this. I don't think we've ever had quite as narrow of a pitch before. We usually give a little. We've given a little bit of a prompt, but this is quite narrow in terms of specifically what the story had to be about and everything. So I'm very curious to see how the different writing styles affect it. It'll be quite intriguing. Are you gonna have another spooky challenge in October? Perhaps. Perhaps. That's all I'm going to say. I can neither confirm nor deny such. But if you'd like one, go ahead and tell us. Tell us in the community. We do look at comments in the community as well. All right. So thank you so much for joining me again. If you are enjoying this challenge, if you'd like to be involved in some challenges in the future, you can always like and subscribe, hit the bell, all those fun things to let us know. Of course, like it just regardless, because it helps us with the algorithm, and I appreciate that. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today, and I will see you around the AutoCrit community. Bye, everybody.